And I want to start by just talking about that final drive in overtime. Dolphins obviously tie the game in the last minute with the field goal, and then they march down 8 plays, 70 yards. Jonnu Smith, who they had held in check, hadn't even gotten a target all game, ends up with 2 big receptions in the middle of the field, and then the game-winning touchdown. What did you see ultimately in that final drive from the Jets defense and the Dolphins offense?
Well, I saw a defense that didn't want to give up the big play. So when you don't give up the big play, you have 2 high safeties, meaning you have a light box. And a lot of people say, okay, when you invite the light box, you invite in the run. Well, what is a screen? It's nothing but an extension of the run game. Right. So being able to get guys in the motion and the misdirection and just same play back to back. And Jonnu Smith was able to get that yak. I want to go back to before that and how we got to the overtime. You talk about a missed lapse. Back in the day, whenever somebody drops the returner drops the ball, people either let up or they get undisciplined, they get out of their lanes. And I thought they lost their lane integrity a little bit, and they gave up the sideline. And that's how they got out to the 40 to even get the game tying field goal to get to the second. So it's about the details. So when you look at what happens, Jonnu Smith, three receptions, probably, 30 yards?
About 40, yeah.
30, 40 yards on that reception. They knew that the Jets were going to try and take away Waddle. They knew they were going to try and take away Tyreek Hill. And what I said before the game started was that Jonnu Smith was benefiting and playing better than any tight end because he was getting a lot of one-on-one matchups. He won those matchups, and the Jets, unfortunately, are going to go to their 7th game in which they lost between, being down with 6 points. And that's the theme and everything that they're going to have to go with saying, hey, how do we close these tight games? Because we had 7 games where we had opportunity to win it, and we lost them all.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, they pretty much played on their heels trying to figure out, man, can we keep everything in front of them? And, the screen game, we talked about that tunnel screen is what Achane does, right? But aside of Achane, it was going to Smith. Mm-hmm. So if you're the Jets right now, they just don't have a closer, right? And we don't have a pass rusher that can close the game. When you look at some of the elite defenses, they can lean on a T.J. Watt or Myles Garrett to go get them. But they caught him in a blitz that one time, and they weren't able to execute. So it's just a tough out, man, for the Jets once again.
It's disappointing because this is one where the Dolphins didn't throw anything new at them that cost them the game. I mean, this has all been on film at this point of the season that we're in. Achane comes into the game. He has already 5 games under his belt this season with 50-plus receiving yards. So you knew what was coming. And, yeah, Jonnu Smith's a guy that we said it before the game. His last 3 games, he has over 300 receiving yards combined. He was quiet during regulation, Gelbs, but obviously they went to him in overtime. But nothing fancy, right? The 2 screens for 34 yards combined, and then obviously the touchdown at the end. You're going to get a good heavy dose even in a down year from Tyreek Hill. It's just a little disappointing to me, and I don't know if it's the way he's being coached or his lack of confidence. DJ Reed's had a really good year. Today was a bad day. He's sitting 10 yards off, giving a cushion. It looked like a 7-on-7 practice at times, the way the Dolphins were running some of these quick drop throws, but that's what Miami wants to do. They don't want Tua taking 5-7-step drop backs and getting hit.
Well, that was the cloud coverage, right? And what's available to press out. Whenever you play any form of cover 3, the weakness of cover 3, because you have to play basically on top man, and it becomes on top man after 15 yards. Pretty much the press out is out there, and everybody's accustomed to the Legion of Boom. That usually Cam Chancellor coming running and taking what we call the seam flat, through the curl, and being able to maybe rob some of those. And the Jets were trying to get cute and try and figure out if they can catch him in a trap. But, Tua Tagovailoa was on his game, and he was getting rid of the ball, and he knew that he was going to have a lot of underneath stuff. And that's what happens when you get into these situational football type of moments. You don't want to give up the big play, but then you give up so much that it forces you to loosen up because, you couldn't get a pass rush because the ball's coming out. And, you got all these vertical holes because then you get aggressive and try and say, okay, how can I get the best of both worlds? How can I blitz you but still be safe not to give up the big plays? So then when you blitz one of those guys, instead of having 4 underneath, you have 3 underneath, and it creates massive holes in your zone coverage.
Bart, I want to go back to something that you said at the beginning in your first comments where you said, hey, it's another 1-score loss and 0-7 now in those games. There have been times where the Jets have lost by 1 score where it's been incredibly frustrating. You're saying this is an inferior team they're playing. They just didn't play well. It shouldn't have even been that close. Today didn't really feel like that to me. Today felt like there were a lot of positives from the Jets' perspective. Aaron Rodgers threw for 300-plus yards for the first time this season, for the first time since 2021. Isaiah Davis looked good for a second straight week. The defense, I thought, overall, DJ Reed had a rough game, but for the most part, played decently well. Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams. Overall, pretty solid. But again, they just can't find ways to win. And I think that's one of the strange things. The last week, too, you almost can't even put your finger on it sometimes, but it feels like the game feels like one that the Jets had control over. And then you look up at the end, it's a one-score game, and it goes in the favor of the Dolphins, you know?
Yeah, you kick the field goal, right? You're feeling good, and then you give up a 40 yards, and all they have to get is 15 yards. It's like the lack of focus. Like, to be able to have all phases focused through from the beginning to the end. It all comes down. When you talk about losing close games, what does it come down to? Situational football.
Yep.
Situational football is about execution under pressure, right? We always talk about high-stress pitches and stuff like that. End of the game, close out, whether you have to get it or you have to stop somebody. Most games come to that. And who is able to not make the mental mistakes? Who's not going to get the holding calls? Who's going to make sure that they're on their details? Who's going to retrace? Who's going to see the field? Or who heart rate's going to build up and create pressure and anxiety so that you don't want to get beat. And so now you're afraid to almost make a play. Right? So that's what it was. They were afraid to make the play, so they were just caught themselves catching instead of being aggressive.